With the final episode of Kenobi airing, it's time to stop and rank all 6 episodes of Kenobi from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of the 6 episodes of Kenobi. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, this will be a spoiler ranking, so if you haven't watched the show yet, go watch the show, then come and watch this ranking. One quick announcement before we get started. Next weekend on July 2nd, I will be at Fan Expo Denver leading a panel on how to grow a nerdy YouTube channel at 2 o'clock. And then right afterwards at 2:45, I'll do a meet and greet right by the creator stage where my panel will be at. And let's get started. Easily in last place is episode 4. From the basic idea of the episode to the execution, everything here to me felt subpar. Right off the bat, for the second time in only 4 episodes of this show, Princess Leia has been kidnapped and needs to be rescued. So they're repeating plot beats already in a very short season. From there, the basic idea of the episode, it's just kind of generic Star Wars stuff because Kenobi is trying to rescue Princess Leia from an Imperial base, just like in A New Hope. And then once you get into the actual episode, it's just filled with these visual Easter eggs referencing A New Hope. So you're just seeing all this familiar generic Star Wars stuff. And then also there's some absolutely unforgivable moments in this. At one point in time, a character escapes by open hand slapping a stormtrooper who falls over. At the end of the episode, Obi-Wan escapes by putting Princess Leia in a trench coat and just walking through a room full of people, and no one seems to find this suspicious at all. And so for me, without question, this episode was filler. It was a repeat of plot points from earlier in the season, and it was very poorly executed. Number 5, episode 2, the other Princess Leia rescue episode. And this one is dramatically better than episode 4. I think it's at a more interesting location that feels like we're not just seeing another generic Imperial base. There's a bit more going on with Obi-Wan Kenobi as he's just now first stepping back into action and trying to remember how to be the hero again and re-engage with the Force. So there's several things about it that I thought were interesting, but I also thought that kind of the execution, the stunt casting, and some of the performances just weren't quite there for me. The big one that kind of stood out with this one is that I just don't feel like Kumail Nanjiani doing his usual shtick fits in Star Wars. The TV shows have had several of these characters where they've kind of put someone in there that's like a comedian, where they're kind of trying to be funny, and they just stand out to me as like, that doesn't feel very Star Wars to me. Like, I really enjoy Kumail Nanjiani in most things that he's in, but when he's like doing this whole thing where he's a grifter and he's tricking people into thinking that he's a Jedi, it's just his usual comedy beats, routine, and patterns. And so it just kind of pulled me out of the world, kind of seeing that. Likewise, having the bass player from Red Hot Chili Peppers giving a performance in Star Wars. All I see is the bass player from Red Hot Chili Peppers in the world of Star Wars. It pulls me out of it. And while I think the Reva character got better and made more sense as the season went along, in these first 2 episodes, I just felt like she was just overcooking it too much with what she was doing. And so just kind of felt awkward and clunky to me the way that her performance happened in this episode. So much better than episode 4, but still kind of a lot of unevenness. Next up, episode 3. And on a plot level, it's fairly simple and straightforward, where they're on the run, they go to a place to find out how to get to the next place. And there's a few odd choices with the execution where there's a roadblock and it's like, oh no, how will we get past this when there's just emptiness to the right, emptiness to the left, but oh no, there's a block in one spot. We have been stopped. But the real standout here, the thing that makes this one actually kind of pop, memorable in the world of Star Wars, is we get Vader in full-on rage mode. And that's what elevates this episode, kind of lifts it up and gives us memorable Star Wars material where a very broken Obi-Wan, who hasn't fully been able to re-embrace his Jedi roots and his connection to the Force, has to fight a full-on, in his prime, Darth Vader who is just out for vengeance. And it's a cool scene when you have Darth Vader just tossing around Obi-Wan Kenobi and actively just trying to torment him by dragging him through fire. That to me was what kind of elevates this episode. Most of the other stuff in it was like, okay, this is kind of more that generic Star Wars TV show type stuff about Imperial transports, checkpoints, barriers that you can't get around. But when you got Vader dragging Obi-Wan through coals, that's pretty awesome. In third place, episode 1. What this one does so well is establishing this great character study of Obi-Wan, who in the prequels, we saw him as one of the Jedi Knights of the Republic. And we saw the Republic in its prime. And then in episode 3, his whole world crumbled. The Republic falls, Empire takes over, and he's failed his Padawan, who's turned to the dark side. And in his mind, his Padawan is dead. He had to kill him because of how his mind had been twisted. And then we jump forward and we see, where is that person at 10 years later? And he's still on mission, but he's lost hope, and he's a very broken character. And the contrast of the world that he was in the prequels and the life that he lived there versus the humble, very basic life that he lives now, and how empowered he felt as the Jedi versus where he's at now and is afraid to use his powers, afraid to do anything. I think that's a very interesting, compelling journey and a better version of what they did with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I'm not a fan of The Last Jedi, and a big part of that is the gap between Return of the Jedi and where he's at in Last Jedi is just too big for me to just make that jump without, you need more than just a couple flashbacks to help me see to bridge those two positions. But with Obi-Wan, the whole movie, Revenge of the Sith, is the bridge to explain how do you go from who he was in the prequels to someone that needs to relearn what hope is. That movie does it pretty well. His whole world was destroyed. He had to make terrible choices to stop Anakin. And that will kind of sit there for 10 years on a desert just watching a boy and watching the world burn around you and fall apart. Yeah, I believe that this is someone that would lose some hope and need to relearn how to be a hero. And I think that's what this episode did so well, is to kind of establish that place. Now, if you've watched my other content about Obi-Wan, you know that I was pretty disappointed with the show as a whole. And a big part of that is because I don't think they fully explored what was set up in this episode. The thing that was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, I like that. I don't think the execution of the journey of making him a more hopeful character again was done as good as it could have been because it was too distracted by other things. So I don't think it lived up to the potential of this episode, what was set up, but that doesn't change the fact was a really great setup for this journey that he could go on. Our runner-up, episode 5, and this is where all the plot lines start to come together. Vader finally catches up once again with Obi-Wan and the people that are on the path, and you start to get this big, gigantic showdown and have several twists, turns, reveals taking place here where big stuff happens that does affect the course of this show and matters for the relationships of the characters here. And I've had my issues with the writing all throughout the entire show and even have some issues with the writing in the last 2 episodes. But one of the big differences with the last 2 episodes is that they brought in Andrew Stanton as one of the writers. And Andrew Stanton was one of the major creative forces for a bunch of the Pixar classics. And he was a part of the writing process for the final 2 episodes. And I think you see a little bit of that polish, a little bit of that heart in the dialogue between the characters here. In particular, when you do the flashbacks and you have Obi-Wan and Anakin doing this training sequence, and there's just a little bit of spark to their dialogue and kind of makes you feel how much they care about each other while kind of informing who their characters are right now and the weakness, the thought process of Anakin and what's going on there. There's just a certain sharpness to it that I really enjoyed. With the Reva character, I think there's an idea there that is potentially great. I don't know that it fits in this show, but we finally get the reveals there that inform what's been going on, why she's been doing, all leading to a very cool sequence where she's trying to get her revenge on Vader for what he did to her when she was young. And she's just no match for Vader. And so she's doing everything she can. And he's just stopping, doesn't even need a lightsaber to easily defeat her, easily run her through. And we get part where it just goes full force mode on a ship, crashes it down, rips the door off. Vader in his prime. It's fun to watch. It's awesome to watch. And you get some of that in here, plus some stormtrooper battles, people running, a bunch of cool stuff in this episode, and a couple nice sharp pieces of dialogue, and just seeing Hayden Christensen again brings back certain Star Wars nostalgia. Even as someone that's not the biggest fan of the prequels, it still brings back that Star Wars nostalgia to see them again in a happy point in their lives. But in first place, episode 6, and I feel this is where the show started to deliver the stuff that I feel the whole season should have been about. Now, of course, you have this rematch between Vader and Obi-Wan that I'm not sure how it fits in the canon, but you get the rematch that the show had kind of been promising from the very beginning. And there's some fun moments in there. I don't think it's one of the great lightsaber duels of all time. I think what is much more interesting here is what it means for the characters as Obi-Wan finally rediscovers the Jedi inside of him, embraces the Force, and is able to overcome a Vader who's just driven so much by rage. And it leads to what I think is the actual good part there, is the interaction between the two of them. And I've seen different interpretations of exactly what some of what Vader's broken lines meant, where he's talking with a smashed helmet that's half Hayden, half James Earl Jones, and where he talks about, like, you didn't create Vader, you didn't kill Anakin, I did. I've heard some people saying that that was Anakin popping out a little bit with the last little bit of Anakin in there to, like, ease Obi-Wan. Then the other side, it's like, no, that's Vader's utter arrogance that he can't even let a hurt Obi-Wan accept the fact that he created Vader in some sense. No, Vader wants to take full credit for it. I think either one of those is kind of an interesting and compelling interpretation of that moment. But it's those little moments that I think is what this show needed a lot more of, and what needed to be more the focus of the show is that exploration of the relationship between the two of them and how Obi-Wan reclaims the Jedi, and starts looking for a new hope. Like, he needs to be that guy. That's what I think the show needed to focus on more, and that's what you got here. Other kind of the underappreciated stars of this episode, Uncle Owen. This is by far the best Uncle Owen we've ever had in Star Wars. And it's the sort of thing where you kind of forget. He's the actual guy that raised Luke. Like, he's the guy that was with him all of those years, actually raising him. Ben was with him for, a couple of days on the Millennium Falcon. And, Anakin was obviously never there. He's just the actual biological father. And Uncle Owen was the father that was actually there, that cared for him, was keeping him safe. And there's a worldview there that makes sense of, he saw what happened to Anakin and doesn't want that for Luke. And it's not that he wasn't willing to step into action. And so I think that was the thing that was actually like, that's fun. I would have liked more of that in this show. Like, we don't need another rescue mission to an Imperial base. We've seen that before. What if we had more time with Uncle Owen and figuring out, like, what was he up to, and showing that bond with Luke? That would have been cool to see more of that. And so this is the episode where we got to see some of that. And then it closes out with Obi-Wan finally being able to see Force Ghost of Qui-Gon. And I'm not sure exactly how that fits into the canon of Qui-Gon being able to do that in light of certain things revealed in other episodes and George Lucas quotes. But as a nice little Easter egg for me, as someone that enjoys the character, it's nice to see Liam Neeson showing back up into Star Wars. So even if it's real brief, it certainly put a grin on my face. So there's I had issues with the show as a whole, and so what it did well is it delivered moments that I really liked. I didn't think the story as a whole came together, but individual episodes could have great moments, awesome moments, things I loved that I got to see in a TV show. That TV shows can deliver this sort of thing. It's awesome to me. the story as a whole, the direction they took things, the emphasis was so much on Inquisitors and Reva. Not the right direction, I think, to take it, but still some awesome stuff in here. The one that had the most awesome stuff that I think focused in on the right things was the last episode, so it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I got more Star Wars content. You can check out my rankings over there. I've done the movies, the lightsaber battles, the villains. Also, if you want to know my full kind of thoughts on why I was disappointed by the season as a whole, check out that video right down there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.